Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So I'm carrying on my English law channel about criminal law and particularly looking at Actus reus, the guilty act, which is one of the two core constituent elements of any crime, whether a misdemeanor or a felony. So we know that Actus reus has to involve behaviour. It usually involves doing something, just occasionally it can involve doing nothing. But generally speaking, you have to do something, not just refrain from doing things. And there has to be a situation which makes this unlawful behaviour. And sometimes the result is required, sometimes not. As I say, drink driving doesn't actually harm anyone if you don't bump into anything, crash into another car, or bump into a signpost which you've damaged. But that action, even though it doesn't result in anything, is still criminal. There are other times when it is only a crime if some harm results. So let's look at conduct. There's got to be some illegal act, and that's the prosecution's case to prove that this illegal act was indeed committed by that defendant. Sometimes an illegal act's been committed. We don't know if it's him or him, and it's up to the prosecution to prove it's the individual they assert and not just somebody. On other occasions, it's not clear if anything happened at all. Okay, so then we have to look at what an actual act is. The American Penal Code says there has to be a bodily movement. Moreover, this movement must be of the person's own free will. It can't be automatism, whereby, let's say, a person had an epileptic fit and they have a mind of their own, the limbs. Or it can't be just jumping in pain because you've been bitten by a dog or something. So a bodily movement. So let's take murder. In this case, this usually considers doing something, shooting, stabbing, putting poison into food, something like that. This is an action. And then, of course, it's up to the prosecution to prove that this took place. So if you sabotage somebody's parachute, then that would also be murder. Or let's say in Hayward 1908 case, this person, he was threatening towards another, chased someone down the street, and that person then had a heart attack in consequence of being chased and frightened, and that was still held to be an action, a murder. So what are the repercussions of this? Well, the ramifications of this is that if the defendant's behaviour contributed to harm coming to someone, then that's a crime. So generally speaking, doing nothing is not a crime. There are exceptions, but I say generally. So the thing about this bodily movement, it must be of the person's volition. So there was Bratty and Attorney General for Northern Ireland in 1961, and in this case, Lord Denning had to look into a case, but this is what he said about bodily movements. No act is punishable if it is done involuntarily. An involuntary act in this context means an act which is done by the muscles without any control by the mind, such as a spasm, a reflex action, or a convulsion, or an act done by a person who is not conscious of what he is doing, such as an act done while suffering from concussion or sleepwalking. Okay, so somnambulism is a defence, but incidentally, not to rape. Apparently, it's impossible to sustain an erection whilst sleepwalking. Anyway, so if you've got no control of what you're doing, then you're in a state of automatism. People who are mentally ill, they can be found to be not guilty by reason of insanity under the Norton rules, but I'll come back to that later, and I'll explore the particulars with greater profundity. So you ought to be able to say what an actus reus is, and this is a part of the key definition of a crime. And then we also got to have the mens rea element. So let's look at the exceptions which I alluded to a moment ago. So there are some situational crimes. There are crimes which involve just having something in your possession, and there are that you can commit a crime by doing nothing if you have a duty to do something. So we'll go through those one by one. So not acting is sometimes a crime. For instance, you're required to wear a seatbelt in a car, you must submit a tax return, you must obey a subpoena. By not obeying the subpoena, you're committing a crime. By sitting in that car moving along and not having put your seatbelt on, that's a crime. By not displaying your license plate and so forth, that is a criminal offence. By not carrying out, let's say, certain safety checks on your plane, if you're a commercial airline, you're committing a crime, and things like that. So these are strict liability offences. Even if there's no mens rea, you didn't intend to do anything wrong, you are still guilty just for the actus reus. So these are called crimes of omission, and they're defined under statute. Having something on your person, which when it's a forbidden thing, is a crime. For example, a firearm and a firearm certificate, Class B or Class C drugs without a prescription, Class A drugs, well, there can be no prescription, certain illegal pornographic